The ship descended through clouds of gray ash that had covered the Earth for 3,000 years. And High Curator Essex Voral pressed his face against the viewing window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Had studied humans his entire life. Yet he had never walked on their dead world until today. Beautiful in a terrible way, he whispered to himself, watching the ruined cities pass beneath them like broken teeth scattered across a wounded jaw. His assistant, a nervous young Valorian named Keth, stood beside him with a datapad clutched to her chest. High Curator, the Council has sent another warning, she said quietly. They remind you that this world remains under quarantine protocol, and they suggest we turn back before what? Essex interrupted with a laugh that echoed through the ship's metal corridors. The humans are dead, Keth. Every last one of them burned away by our ancestors 3 millennia ago. And dead species cannot hurt us. Keth said nothing, but her 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that suggested deep unease. The Valorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, conquering and absorbing over 800 species into their civilization. But humans had been different from all the others. When the Empire scouts first discovered Earth 5,000 years ago, they found a primitive world torn apart by its own conflicts. Nations fighting nations, weapons pointed at their own kind. Hatred and violence woven into every corner of their short history. The Empire had watched and waited, expecting the humans to destroy themselves, but they never did. Instead, humanity crawled forward through blood and fire, reaching toward the stars with hands still stained from their own wars. And when they finally achieved space travel, they spread faster than any species the Empire had ever encountered. They colonized moons and asteroids and distant planets with a hunger that frightened the Valorian Council. Too aggressive, the Emperor had declared at the time. Too unpredictable. Too dangerous to allow into our civilization. And so the Empire had done what it always did with dangerous species. It erased them. The war lasted only 7 years. Though the humans fought with a ferocity that shocked every Valorian general. And even when their fleets were destroyed and their colonies burned, they refused to surrender in the end. The Empire used planet-killing weapons to sterilize Earth itself, turning the blue world into a gray tomb where nothing could ever grow again. The humans died screaming defiance at the stars, and the Empire moved on, adding another conquered world to its endless collection. But rumors persisted through the centuries, whispers of secret human weapons hidden beneath mountains, technology that had nearly turned the tide of the invasion. And Essex had spent 40 years tracking down every fragment of evidence until he finally convinced the Council to let him explore the Forbidden World. We are approaching the coordinates, the ship's pilot announced over the speakers. Preparing to land near the mountain structure, the ship touched down on a plateau covered in ancient snow mixed with ash. And Essex led his team of 12 researchers out into the cold air. The entrance to the bunker was exactly where his research had predicted, a massive door built into the mountainside, still sealed after 3,000 years. Remarkable, Essex breathed, running his long fingers across symbols carved into the metal, their language preserved perfectly. And look at these markings, military designations of some kind. His chief scientist, a gruff old Valorian named Torvex, scanned the door with his equipment and frowned deeply. The power signatures inside are still active, he reported. Whatever they left in here, it is still running. Then let us see what the humans wanted to protect so badly, Essex said with excitement bubbling in his voice. It took them 2 hours to cut through the door. And when they finally stepped inside, the lights flickered on automatically as if the bunker had been waiting for visitors. Long corridors stretched into the darkness ahead, lined with doors and strange machinery that none of them recognized. Weapons storage, Torvex guessed. The humans were famous for their weapons, but as they explored deeper, They found something far more interesting than weapons. The central chamber was vast and circular, filled with equipment that hummed with quiet energy. And in the very center stood a single pod made of glass and metal. Inside the pod lay a human. Essex approached slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Because this was impossible. Every human was dead, the entire species exterminated. Yet here one lay as if sleeping peacefully. The human was male, tall and muscular, dressed in black armor that covered his body like a second skin. And his face was surprisingly calm, almost peaceful. "He is alive," Keth whispered in horror. Staring at the monitors attached to the pod, his vital signs are stable. He has been in cryogenic sleep this entire time. 3,000 years, Essex said softly. He has been waiting here for 3,000 years. He walked around the pod, reading the symbols engraved on its surface. And his translator worked quickly to decode the human language. "Prometheus contingency," he read aloud. "Last Guardian protocol. Do not open except by unified Earth command." "High Curator," Torvek said firmly. "We should not disturb this. We should seal this place and report back to the Council. Let them decide what to do." But Essex was not listening anymore. He was staring at the human's face, imagining the knowledge locked inside that primitive brain. The secrets of human warfare that had nearly defeated the Empire's invasion. The technology that could change everything. "Open it," he commanded. "Sir." "The warnings clearly state," I said. "Open it." Essex shouted. "The Empire has ruled 1,000 worlds for 10,000 years. We have crushed every enemy and conquered every challenge. What threat could one frozen primitive possibly pose to us?" Keth hesitated, but she followed orders as she always did. And her fingers danced across the control panel until the pod began to hiss with escaping gas. The glass lid rose slowly, and the cold air inside rushed out like a dying breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the human's eyes opened. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held no fear, no confusion, no panic at waking in a strange place surrounded by alien faces. Instead, those eyes moved slowly across the room, studying each Valorian with calm precision, calculating distances and positions and threats. When those eyes finally settled on Essex, the High Curator felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. "Where am I?" the human asked, his voice rough from 3,000 years of silence. "What year is it?" Essex swallowed hard and forced himself to speak with authority. "You are on Earth," he answered. "The year by your calendar would be approximately 5024. You have been asleep for 3 millennia. And I am High Curator Essex Voral of the Valorian Empire." The human sat up slowly, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone who had just woken from such a long sleep. "The Valorian Empire," he repeated, and something flickered in those dark eyes. "I remember you." He looked past Essex toward the bunker's walls, toward the dead world waiting outside, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet but filled with something that made every Valorian step backward. "Tell me what happened to Earth." And Essex realized, far too late, that he had made a terrible mistake. Commander Elias Mercer listened in silence as Essex explained what had happened to his world. And with every word the High Curator spoke, the cold inside Mercer's chest grew deeper and harder. Earth was dead, not conquered, not occupied, but completely destroyed. Every city burned. Every forest turned to ash. Every ocean boiled away until nothing remained but a gray ball of rock spinning alone in the darkness. 8 billion people had lived on Earth when Mercer entered his cryogenic pod. And now there were none. His mother who had kissed him goodbye was dead. His friends who had fought beside him were dead. The children who had played in the streets of his hometown were dead. And every human who had ever dreamed of seeing the stars was dead, all of them gone, erased like they had never existed at all. We had no choice. Desix said, with a tone that suggested he expected understanding. Your species was too dangerous, too aggressive. You would have eventually threatened the stability of our empire. And we could not allow that. Mercer said nothing. He simply looked at the alien with those dark, calculating eyes, memorizing every detail of the Valorian's face, the way his forearms moved when he talked, the nervous twitch in his left eye. But that was 3,000 years ago. Desix continued quickly. The war is ancient history now, and I am not your enemy. I am a scientist who has dedicated his life to studying your species, and I have great respect for what humanity accomplished. Respect, Mercer repeated softly, tasting the word like poison on his tongue. Yes. Your technology was remarkable. Your art was beautiful. Your music still survives in private collections throughout the Empire, Desix said eagerly. And you are the greatest discovery of my career. The last living human. A treasure beyond measure. Mercer stood up from the pod, and every Valorian in the room stepped back instinctively. He was not particularly large by human standards, but something about the way he moved made him seem bigger than he was. Dangerous in a way that went beyond simple physical strength. What do you want from me? He asked. Knowledge, Desix answered. Your military technology nearly defeated our invasion, and we never understood how. We want to learn your secrets, study your tactics, understand how such a young species could fight so effectively against a civilization that has ruled for 10,000 years. Mercer smiled. But there was no warmth in it. You want me to teach you how humans fight? Yes, Desix exclaimed with excitement. Think of what we could accomplish together. Think of how your knowledge could benefit the Empire. And what happens to me after I share everything I know? Desix hesitated for just a moment. And that hesitation told Mercer everything he needed to know. He would be studied, examined, dissected, and eventually discarded once they had extracted every useful piece of information from his mind and body. Was not a person to them, he was a specimen, a relic of a dead species, a curiosity to be picked apart and catalogued. You will be treated with dignity, Desix said finally. I give you my word, Mercer laughed, and the sound echoed through the bunker like thunder. Your empire murdered my entire species and burned my world to ash, and now you offer me dignity? He stepped forward, and Desix stumbled backward into his guards. I will come with you, Mercer said calmly. I will let you take me wherever you wish. I will answer your questions and submit to your examinations. Because I want to learn about your empire as much as you want to learn about me. Desix blinked in surprise at this easy surrender. You will cooperate. I will cooperate, Mercer confirmed. For now. The guards moved in cautiously, binding his wrists with energy restraints that hummed against his skin. And Mercer did not resist as they led him to the ship during the journey to the prison station. He sat quietly in his cell, watching everything, listening to everything the guards talked freely around him, assuming he could not understand their language. But the nanomachines in his blood were already adapting, learning, translating their words into meaning. He learned that the Valorian Empire now controlled over 1,200 worlds across 3 galaxies. He learned that hundreds of species lived under imperial rule, most of them as slaves or servants, their cultures crushed and their histories erased. He learned that the Empire had grown complacent over the millennia, its military bloated and slow, its leaders more concerned with politics than warfare. He learned that the galaxy had forgotten what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose at the prison station. They placed him in a high-security cell deep beneath the surface, surrounded by guards and cameras and automated defense systems, designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in the Empire. The warden was a cruel Valorian named Dreth, who enjoyed tormenting his prisoners. And he took special pleasure in visiting Mercer's cell every day to mock him. The last human, Dreth would say with laughter dripping from his voice. the final survivor of a failed species, locked in a cage where you belong. Mercer never responded to the insults. He simply watched and waited, counting the guards, timing their patrols, identifying the weaknesses in their security systems. One day, the young translator Keth came to his cell with questions from the Six. Was different from the other Valorians. There was a kindness in her eyes that seemed out of place in such a cruel empire. And she spoke to Mercer like he was a person rather than a specimen. High Curator Thesix wants to know about human warfare, she said nervously. He wants to understand why your species fought so hard, even when defeat was certain. Because we had something worth fighting for, Mercer answered quietly. What could be worth dying for? Freedom, Mercer said simply. The chance to determine our own future, to live as we chose, to never bow to anyone who tried to put chains on our souls. Keth was silent for a long moment, and something flickered in her 4 eyes that looked almost like recognition. The Empire does not believe in freedom, she whispered. We believe in order, in hierarchy, in knowing your place. And what is your place, Keth? She flinched at the question like it had physically struck her. I am a translator, a servant of the High Curator. A servant, Mercer repeated. Is that what you want to be? What I want does not matter. It should, Mercer said firmly. What you want should be the only thing that matters. Keth stared at him with confusion written across her alien features. Because no one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever suggested that her desires were important before she could respond. Mercer leaned forward and asked her a single question that would change everything. Does your empire still keep slaves? She hesitated, looking away from his piercing gaze. Yes, she admitted quietly. Hundreds of species, billions of individuals. They serve the empire because they have no choice. Are you happy with that? Happiness is not. Answer the question. Keth took a deep breath and spoke the truth that she had buried deep inside herself for her entire life. No, I am not happy with it. I have never been happy with it. But there is nothing anyone can do to change it. The Empire is too powerful. Resistance is impossible. Mercer smiled. And this time, there was something almost warm in it. Impossible is a word humans never understood. He sat back in his cell and closed his eyes. And Keth left without asking any more questions that night. As the prison station hummed with the quiet sounds of sleeping guards and deactivated security systems, Mercer opened his eyes. The nanomachines in his body had spent weeks analyzing the station systems, learning its codes, mapping its weaknesses. It was time to stop waiting. It was time to remind the galaxy what humans were capable of. The first guard died before he could even scream. And the alarms that should have sounded remained silent because they no longer answered to the Empire. They answered to the last human, and he had work to do. The prison station had been designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in the Valorian Empire, built with layers of security systems and armed guards and automated weapons that could kill anything that moved without authorization. It took Elias Mercer exactly 11 minutes to tear through all of Ith, moved through the corridors like a ghost, appearing and disappearing in the shadows, striking with a precision that the Valorians had never seen before. Nanomachines in his blood enhanced his speed and strength beyond normal human limits, and his mind processed information faster than any organic brain should be capable of, but more than his physical abilities. It was his training that made him unstoppable. Humanity had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war, learning through blood and fire how to fight against impossible odds. And all of that knowledge had been uploaded into Mercer's mind before he entered the cryogenic pod. He knew 100 ways to kill with his bare hands, 1,000 ways to disable security systems, 10,000 ways to turn an enemy's strength into weakness. The guards never had a chance. He found the Warden Dreth hiding in his office, surrounded by 6 elite soldiers armed with the best weapons the Empire could provide. Stay back. Dreth screamed, his voice cracking with fear. "Do you know who I am? I am the warden of this station. I have connections to the Imperial Senate. They will hunt you across the galaxy if you harm me." Mercer stepped over the bodies of the guards without even looking at them. "You tortured prisoners for entertainment," he said calmly. "You starved them. You beat them. You made them beg for death just because it made you feel powerful." Dreth pressed himself against the wall, his forearms shaking uncontrollably. "Please, I was just doing my job. I was following orders. It was not personal." "Everything is personal," Mercer replied. "What happened next was quick and efficient. And when it was over, the warden would never hurt anyone again." Mercer walked through the rest of the station without killing anyone. Else the prisoners stared at him through their cell doors with hope and terror mixed together in their eyes. And he unlocked every door he passed. "Go," he told them. "Find ships. Escape this place. Spread the word that the Empire can be defeated." They ran, stumbling over each other in their desperation to reach freedom. And Mercer watched them go with something like satisfaction in his chest in the communication center. He found what he was looking for, a broadcast system capable of transmitting to every frequency in the quadrant. He sat down at the console and began recording his message. "My name is Commander Elias Mercer of the United Earth Defense Force, and I am speaking to every slave, every prisoner, every soul who has ever suffered under the boot of the Valorian Empire." He paused, letting his words settle into the silence. 3,000 years ago, your masters destroyed my world and murdered my people because they feared what we might become. And they believed that by killing us, they could erase us from history." His voice grew harder, colder. "They were wrong. I am the last human. But I am not helpless, and I am not afraid. And I am not going to stop until every chain in this galaxy is broken. Your empire tells you that resistance is futile, that their power is absolute, that you have no choice but to submit and obey. I am here to tell you that they are lying. Empires fall, tyrants die, and freedom always finds a way to survive, no matter how hard the powerful try to crush it. I am coming for your chains, your thrones, and your lies. And I will not rest until every being in this galaxy has the right to choose their own destiny. Free your slaves, Valorians, or I will free them for you. This is my only warning." He ended the transmission and walked out of the station without looking back. The message spread across the quadrant like wildfire, copied and recopied by rebellious technicians and curious civilians who had never heard anything like it within days. The entire empire was talking about the last human. Some laughed at his arrogance, mocking the idea that one man could threaten the greatest civilization in galactic history, but others listened to his words and felt something stir inside them that they had not felt in centuries. Hope. The Imperial Senate responded with predictable fury, declaring Mercer the most dangerous criminal in the Empire and offering a reward of 10 million credits for his capture or death. They sent a battle fleet of 50 warships to hunt him down, commanded by Admiral Vexus, one of their most decorated officers, one human. Vexus sneered as he studied the intelligence reports. One primitive creature with delusions of grandeur. This will be over within a week. He was wrong. Mercer did not run from the fleet. He led them on a chase through asteroid fields and nebulae, always staying just out of reach, always appearing where they least expected him. He disabled their communication relays, hacked their navigation systems, and planted false signals that sent their ships crashing into each other in the confusion. When the flagship finally cornered him near a small moon, Vexus prepared to celebrate his victory. "Surrender now," he broadcast to Mercer's stolen shuttle, "and I will grant you a quick death. I have a counter-offer." Mercer replied. The flagship's lights flickered and died throughout the massive vessel. Doors locked and unlocked at random. Atmosphere vented from non-essential compartments. and the ship's own defense systems turned inward and began targeting the crew. Mercer's voice echoed through every speaker. On the ship, your security codes were outdated 3,000 years ago, he said calmly. Your AI is running on software that my people considered primitive before you even discovered our world. And your crew has never faced an enemy who fights the way humans fight. Admiral Vexus watched in horror as his bridge crew collapsed from gas released through the ventilation system. Non-lethal, but completely incapacitating within 6 hours. Mercer controlled the flagship entirely. He broadcast another message. This time from the bridge of the captured vessel, with the unconscious admiral visible behind him. I want you to understand something, he said to the galaxy. I could have killed everyone on this ship, every soldier, every officer, every person who chose to hunt me, but I did not. I am not here for revenge. I am here for justice, and there is a difference. Send these people home. Let them tell their families what one human did to the pride of the Imperial fleet. Let them describe how easily their greatest weapons were turned against them. And then ask yourselves a question. There were 8 billion of us once. 8 billion humans who learned to fight and survive and overcome every challenge the universe threw at them. Your empire killed them all. But you could not kill what they believed in. I am proof of that. He released the surviving crew and sent the flagship drifting back toward Imperial space with its unconscious admiral still aboard. The story spread faster than any official news could control. Whispered in slave quarters and shouted in rebel hideouts. Repeated by children who had never known anything but Imperial rule. The last human was real, the last human was fighting, and the Empire was afraid somewhere in the darkness between stars. Mercer plotted his next move. Surrounded by screens showing slave populations and military installations and the weak points in Imperial control that no one had ever dared to exploit. War for freedom had only just begun. The rebellion spread like fire across dry grass, igniting worlds that had been silent for centuries and waking spirits that the Empire had long believed crushed on the mined planet of Kethros. Slaves who had worked in darkness their entire lives suddenly rose up and seized the facilities that had imprisoned them on the factory world of Vorn Prime. Workers sabotaged the war machines they were forced to build, destroying more Imperial equipment in 1 week than enemy forces had managed in 100 years on dozens of moons and stations and colonies across the quadrant. Beings who had never imagined freedom began to fight for it, and everywhere they fought, they whispered the same name. The last human. Mercer did not lead these rebellions directly, because he understood something that the Empire had never grasped about resistance movements. True revolution could not depend on a single leader. It had to grow from the hearts of the oppressed themselves, fueled by their own anger and their own hope. His job was not to fight their battles for them, but to show them that battles could be won. He traveled from system in stolen ships, appearing without warning to strike at Imperial targets and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. He attacked communication arrays that controlled slave populations, freeing millions from the electronic collars that monitored their every movement, destroyed prison ships carrying political dissidents to execution, returning the survivors to their homeworlds as symbols of defiance. He hacked into Imperial propaganda networks and broadcast the truth about the Empire's atrocities, showing images of mass graves and torture facilities that had been hidden from the public for generations. And with every victory, more beings joined the fight. The Talaxan refugees who had lost their homeworld to Imperial expansion formed the first rebel fleet, a ragged collection of merchant vessels and stolen warships held together by determination and desperate hope. The Keth warriors, whose people had been conquered 5,000 years ago and forced to serve as soldiers for the Empire, began deserting in record numbers, bringing their military training to the rebellion. Even some Valorians joined the cause. Young idealists who had grown up believing the Empire's lies and could no longer ignore. The blood on their hands Mercer trained them all, sharing the tactical knowledge that humanity had accumulated through millennia of warfare. He taught them guerrilla tactics that had been perfected in Earth's jungles and mountains, strategies for fighting enemies with superior numbers and technology. He showed them how to use the Empire's own infrastructure against it, turning the tools of oppression into weapons of liberation. But more than tactics and technology, he gave them something the Empire could never understand. He gave them belief. The Valorians think strength comes from size and numbers, he told them during a gathering on a hidden rebel base. They think that having more ships and more soldiers makes them invincible. But humans learned a different truth through our history. Strength comes from knowing what you fight for. It comes from refusing to surrender even when victory seems impossible. It comes from looking at your enemy and saying, "I would rather die free than live as your slave." The Empire has ruled through fear for 10,000 years, but fear is a weak foundation for power, because eventually people become more afraid of living in chains than they are of dying to break them. That time has come. The rebellion grew stronger with every passing month, and the Empire responded with increasing brutality. They burned entire worlds that showed sympathy for the rebels, executing millions to serve as examples. They deployed their most advanced weapons and their most ruthless commanders, throwing everything they had at the uprising. But the harder they struck, the more beings joined the fight against them on the imperial capital world. High Curator Thesic stood before the Senate and pleaded for them to understand what they were facing. "You must listen to me," he said, with desperation cracking his voice. "I have studied humans my entire life. I know what they are capable of. And we are making the same mistake our ancestors made 3,000 years ago. We are underestimating them." The senators laughed and jeered, mocking the old academic who had caused this disaster by waking the sleeping human. "One man," sneered Senator Vorax, the most powerful voice in the chamber. "You expect us to believe that one primitive creature is responsible for all of this chaos?" "He is not responsible for it," Thesic replied. "He merely showed them it was possible. That is what makes him so dangerous. We studied humans before we destroyed them, and we learned that they do not think like us. They do not fight like us. They do not surrender like us. When we conquered other species, they eventually accepted their defeat and learned to serve us obediently. But humans never accepted anything. They turned loss into legend, vengeance into religion, and the memory of their fallen into fuel for eternal struggle. We did not wake up a soldier in that bunker. We woke up a symbol, and symbols cannot be killed." The Senate fell silent, finally hearing the fear in the old curator's voice. "What do you suggest we do?" the Emperor asked from his golden throne. "Negotiate," Thesic answered. "Free the slaves, offer peace. Give the rebels what they want before we lose everything." Emperor's laugh was cold and cruel. "The Valorian Empire does not negotiate with insects." He stood, addressed the entire Senate with fire in his ancient eyes. "We will crush this rebellion as we have crushed every challenge in our history. Summon every fleet, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We will find this human, and we will destroy him so completely that no one will ever dare to speak his name again. And then we will burn every world that supported him until the galaxy remembers what it means to defy the Empire." The order went out across all 1,200 Imperial worlds. Every available warship was recalled from their posts. Every reserve force was activated. Every weapon of mass destruction was prepared for deployment. The largest military operation in the history of the Valorian Empire would converge on the last known location of the rebel fleet. It would be the end of the rebellion. It would be the end of the last human. It would be a Victory that would echo through eternity, but deep in rebel territory. Mercer received word of the approaching armada and smiled. "They are coming," Keth reported nervously, having long since abandoned her loyalty to the Empire. "Every ship they have, every weapon, everything." "Good," Mercer replied. "That means there is nothing left to protect their homeworld. It means they are desperate, and desperate enemies make mistakes." He turned to face the gathered rebel leaders. Dozens of species united by a shared dream of freedom. "The time has come," he told them, "to show the galaxy that empires can fall. Are you ready?" They answered with a roar that shook the walls of the chamber and across the stars. The final battle drew near. The Imperial Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel like a swarm of metal locusts. 3,000 warships stretching across the void in perfect formation, bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire worlds. At its center flew the Emperor's flagship, the largest vessel ever constructed, a floating palace of death and dominance that had never known defeat from his golden command throne. The Emperor surveyed the battlefield and smiled with cruel satisfaction. "Where are they?" he demanded. "Where is this rebel fleet that dared to challenge us?" His sensors detected them moments later, a collection of perhaps 400 ships gathered near a barren moon. A pitiful force compared to the might of the Empire. "Is this a joke?" Admiral Korvax laughed from his position beside the throne. "They have brought children's toys to fight against gods." The Emperor raised his hand to give the order that would end the rebellion forever, but before he could speak, alarms began screaming across every ship in the fleet. "What is happening?" The Emperor roared. "The rebel ships are moving," a terrified officer reported. "But not in formation. They are scattering in all directions, heading toward different parts of our fleet. They are running away like cowards," Admiral Korvax sneered. "Hunt them down, destroy them one by one." "No," the Emperor said slowly, watching the tactical display with growing unease. "They are not running. They are dividing our formation." The rebel ships were fast and unpredictable, darting between the massive Imperial vessels like insects harassing giants. Drawing individual ships away from the main fleet and pursuit it was an ancient human tactic, one that had been used on Earth's oceans thousands of years ago. By smaller forces facing superior enemies, divide and conquer. It is a trap. The Emperor realized too late. Fall back to defensive formation. But his orders could not travel fast enough deep within the Imperial flagship. Systems began to malfunction in ways that should have been impossible. Doors locked, trapping soldiers in their quarters. Weapon systems went offline without explanation. The ship's artificial intelligence, which had served the Empire loyally for centuries, suddenly began to speak with a human voice. "Hello again," Mercer said through every speaker on the vessel. "Did you miss me?" The Emperor's face twisted with rage and fear. "How is this possible? How did you infiltrate my ship?" "I did not need to infiltrate anything," Mercer replied calmly. "Your flagship uses the same basic software architecture that the Empire has used for thousands of years. Software that human engineers helped develop before you decided to exterminate us. We built backdoors into every system, just in case we ever needed them. You thought you destroyed us completely, but you kept using our technology. You built your entire civilization on the bones of mine, and now those bones are waking up throughout the Imperial fleet." Similar chaos erupted on ship after ship. Slave soldiers who had been waiting for this moment turned on their master's engineers who had secretly supported the rebellion's sabotage. Critical systems communication arrays broadcast. Mercer's voice to every corner of the battlefield. "Soldiers of the Empire, hear me," he said. "You have a choice to make right now. In this moment, you can keep fighting for masters who see you as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. Or you can lay down your weapons and join us in building something better. There will be no punishment for those who choose peace." But there will be no mercy for those who choose to continue the slaughter. Choose now, across the fleet. Thousands of soldiers made their decisions. Some kept fighting, loyal to the Empire until their last breath, but many more threw down their weapons and surrendered. Unwilling to die for rulers who had never cared whether they lived, the battle turned into chaos, with Imperial ships firing on each other as mutinies erupted throughout the fleet. Admiral Korvax tried to rally his forces, screaming orders that no one followed, until a shot from his own bridge crew silenced him forever. The Emperor watched his invincible armada tear itself apart and felt something he had never experienced in his 300 years of life total. Absolute defeat when rebel soldiers finally breached his throne room. They found him sitting alone on his golden chair, surrounded by the bodies of guards who had died protecting him. Mercer walked in last, his black armor scorched from battle, but his dark eyes clear and calm. "It is over," he told the Emperor simply. "Your fleet is destroyed, your loyalists are surrendering, and your Senate has already begun negotiating terms with our leaders." "Impossible," the Emperor whispered. "We are the Valorian Empire. We have ruled for 10,000 years. We cannot be defeated by slaves and primitives. You were defeated by people who remembered their own worth." Mercer corrected him. "By beings who refused to accept that their lives had no value. By souls who would rather die fighting than live kneeling. That is the power you never understood. That is what humans always knew." He stepped closer to the broken Emperor and spoke his final words to the tyrant. "Your reign is over. Your dynasty ends today, and the galaxy will never again bow to masters who rule through fear and cruelty. Remember this moment when history judges you. Remember that an empire of 1,000 worlds was brought down by the hope you tried to destroy." The Emperor was taken away in chains, and the war was over in the months that followed. The galaxy transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Slave species were freed by the billions, returning to homeworlds they had not seen in generations. A new galactic alliance formed from the ashes of the Empire, built on principles of freedom and cooperation rather than domination. Monuments to imperial conquest were torn down and replaced with memorials to those who had suffered and fought and died for liberation. And on a distant colony world at the edge of known space, something miraculous happened. Ship landed carrying passengers who had been hiding for 3,000 years. Descendants of Project Exodus, humanity's secret backup plan. They have fled Earth before the final bombardment, scattering across the stars to wait and survive, and hope that someday they might emerge safely. Mercer stood at the landing pad as the ship's doors opened and humans, real, living humans, stepped out into the sunlight. There were thousands of them, young and old, carrying the genetic and cultural legacy of a species that had refused to die. A young girl approached him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you the one from the stories?" she asked. "The last human?" Mercer knelt down to meet her gaze, and for the first time in 3,000 years, tears rolled down his face. "I was the last human," he said softly. "But not anymore. Now I am just one of many, and we have a whole galaxy to rebuild." He stood and looked up at the stars that had witnessed so much death and destruction, so much courage and sacrifice. Earth was gone forever, but humanity survived, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The Empire had tried to erase them from existence, and it had failed. The galaxy had learned the truth that humans had always known: you could burn their cities and destroy their worlds and kill everyone they loved, but you could never kill what they believed in. And as long as hope remained, nothing was truly impossible, not even coming back from extinction to make your murderers regret everything they had done. The Valorian Empire had awakened Earth's forgotten weapon, and they had regretted it with every fiber of their being, as they always would, forever.